Some years ago, I did a parish mission down in Florida. It's the hardest thing I do for a lot of reasons I don't want to get into because it's not germane to the point I'm going to try and make today. But I got the invitation to do that through the music minister there, who is a good friend of mine. This guy is the most talented musician I've ever worked with. Present company notwithstanding. I mean, got out of that one. This guy has been called a prodigy by NPR. The Chicago Tribune lists him as one of the best in the world. He's traveled nationally and internationally. It is more than just his passion. And so I said to him, okay, well, I'll come down and I'll do this for your parish, but I'm going to stay with you because let me tell you something. What's said here stays here. Okay. When you travel on the church's dime, you stay in the most funky places. I mean, I have shared a bedroom with the pastor's dog. I mean, I was on the road. It was just, so I said, I'll stay with you in your condo because it's a nice place. Well, I'll tell you something. You want to get to know somebody, crash in their joint because, you see everything, right? And he has this organ, can you believe this? He has an organ council in his home. And he was preparing for a tour shortly after I would have left, and he was constantly on this thing. And, we had a really good relationship because, he would spend the day working on, playing the organ, and I would spend the day watching the Cartoon Channel on cable. So it was a great combination, and I was amazed at how much work he puts into what he does. Now, I thought I do a lot of prep, and I do, but it pales in comparison. I don't know how we got talking about it one day, but I said, well, are you ever going to get married? And he said, I kind of like to do that. And he said, I'd like to have kids. And I said, you're really not the dad type. I mean, really, just like, I said, I would never tell anyone to get married or not get married. But I said to him, I will tell you this. If it ever happens and you get serious and you start thinking about marriage, you better well let your intended know how much a part of your life music is. Because she'd have to be willing to play second fiddle to your passion. And I don't know a lot of women who would do that. I mean, it's not just something he does, it's kind of like who he is. It had that big of a role in his life. And he still hasn't married, much to the relief of the women of Florida. You do something passionately enough, you do something with enough of a commitment, and it not only tells your story, it shapes your story. And that was the problem John was having here. The John that's mentioned in today's gospel is the brother of James. Jesus had that inner circle of disciples, James and John, brothers, Zebedee's sons, and of course, Peter. So I want to put this in context because I think it'll make a little bit more sense. 2 weeks ago, if you remember, Jesus asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they go through this, and, John the Baptist, Elijah, and then Peter, identifies him as the Christ. And it was a real human story. You could just see Jesus itching to reveal this about himself. So, he gets it. I'm the Christ. All right. Okay. So this is what's going to have to happen. I'm going to have to be rejected. I'm going to be tortured. I'm going to be killed, but I'll be raised. And Peter rebukes him, and then Jesus rebukes Peter. He calls Peter Satan. That would scare the daylights out of me. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like to be called Satan. Least of all by God's Son. So, okay, 3 times in Mark, Jesus predicts his passion. And there's a pattern that repeats itself each of the 3 times. He announces he's going to have to suffer and get killed. The disciples, each and every time, misunderstand him. Not the sharpest knives in the drawer. And then it follows up with Jesus trying to correct him. So he gives them that initial prediction. Last week, we got the second prediction, the most concise. And this week's gospel is that attempt by Jesus to correct their misunderstanding. And so this is all a part of that. And there was something that was said last week that kind of carries over here. John's intolerance of this person who's preaching is because he doesn't know him. And just because he doesn't know him doesn't mean he isn't doing a good thing. But because he doesn't know who this guy is, why he does what he does. But, and here's the key, this was said last week and it's repeated here. Jesus says, if he's doing this stuff in my name, he's got to be a good guy. The gospel concluded last Sunday with Jesus talking about the primacy of children. And he says, anyone who receives a child in my name is a disciple of mine. That was verse 37. And here it is. 2 verses later, he says the same thing again, but this time to John. If this guy is doing this in my name, it's going to be okay. Jesus is tolerant because of what the guy is doing and why. And simply and only because John doesn't know him, he doesn't get it. And he rejects him. He means well, but he's too limiting. You know, bigotry like that can come from some very good places. Sometimes bigotry can be born out of an attempt to be loyalty on steroids, right? It's no longer loyalty. If it's exaggerated, it's blind obedience. Or sometimes maybe there's a self-righteous, kind of proclamation of truth, not allowing for individual circumstances, situations, and conditions. Maybe it's an attempt to maintain innocence or preserve unity. When those things get exaggerated, it starts to go south. I'm sure most of you have heard the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt. Did you hear that? Did you ever hear, familiar with that? All right. It not only breeds contempt, it can also breed ignorance or arrogance. Let's play a little game here, all right? Rain, snow, ice, fog. Got it? What's the common denominator among those 4 elements? Water. Hey, you guys are so smart. Yeah, water. Because here's one way divine creation works. God says, okay, I'm going to create something. And just to give us a taste, an experience of God's expansive creativity, God says, you know what? I'm going to recreate that in different ways. So he takes water and he makes rain out of it, he makes ice out of it, he makes snow out of it, he makes fog out of it, he makes mist out of it. He expresses that same thing in different manners and molecular makeups, but it's fundamentally still rain. The trouble is, I don't like snow. It's cold. Plus, I have to shovel it, so I reject that. You see, the problem is us. It's not what God's doing. This is why we have different countries and cultures and climates and traditions. You know, there are over 7,100 languages spoken in this world. It's that God's creation is that expansive. The problem, though, is this. There's three bodies of knowledge. There's things we know. There's things we don't know, but we can learn. And then there are things that we'll never know. It's called mystery. And the disciples will not understand the cross until they go through that experience. Up until then, they're going to keep getting it wrong. They're going to be misunderstanding it and be confused by it. They have to allow that experience to become a part of their life. You see, what you and I identify with says a lot to the people in our lives of who we are, of what we believe, of who we become. And if your commitment is to Jesus, your life, imagine if people did this, your life would be revealing that reality to others. Think of how much better the world would be, huh? Whatever it is that we commit to. And some people, in their other than conscious mindset, are being directed by resentment, by fear. And I don't know about you, but I also see a whole lot of hate. Things got to change. And they can, and they will, if we're more mindful of that, if we're more open to God's creation. Because if what we do in the name of Jesus, we will be revealing the Christ.